Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Strategy Session. I am Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And joining me tonight are two veteran political strategists and Lincoln Project senior advisors, Joe Trippi and Matthew Dowd. Matthew, Joe, welcome.
Good to be
Thank you,
with you.
Susan. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Matthew.
Well, we are about 98 days from the midterms. There is a lot going on. Trump wants the Supreme Court to help him mess with mail-in voting. Todd Blanche's AG nomination is hanging on by a thread. The Pentagon is quietly erasing U.S. casualties from the Iran war count. But let's start first with Trump trying to order the Senate to stay in D.C. until the Save America Act passes, or they terminate the filibuster. Joe, I'm going to start with you. You have been around for a long time. There's always tension between a president and Congress, even when they're both from the same party. But I mean, Donald Trump has taken an extremely heavy hand with Congress. And this is pretty unprecedented, where he's basically telling John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, what to do. Do you think this is going to backfire?
Well, generally, what's happened in the past is they bow and do whatever he says. So it's actually pretty significant. It just shows how outside the bounds here that the votes aren't there. I don't think to do either one of these things. Not from Democrats. I mean, they don't have the votes within his MAGA Republican Senate. So, I don't know. I'm much more interested, Matthew, in what you're thinking about all this. You know that the party, the inner workings over there better than I do, but it doesn't seem to me that this is going to work for Trump.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I still hesitate to say that the Republicans won't fold like a cheap tin.
Right. Exactly.
Because that's what they've done consistently, even when. But I noticed that, John Thune, the majority leader, has basically said, I don't know what he wants. Basically said, I don't know what he wants us to do. There's no vote. The votes aren't there. We've put it on the floor that we know the votes aren't there. And then I noticed today that one of the senators on the committee to vote on the AG said that they're likely to postpone the vote because he didn't think the votes were there right now on the committee. I don't know. At some point, it's hard to twist arms of people that you've come out against, and Tom Tillis and John Cornyn. But I don't know what their, post-politics plan is. But I think as of right now, it looks bad for Trump. But again, I can't. There's no guarantee that the Republican caucus won't fold again.
So why has this become the end-all be-all for Donald Trump, where he did not sign that housing bill that passed with bipartisan support? For a while, he was saying that he wouldn't even take any more action, trying to get funding for the Iran war. Why is it the Save America or bust for him, Joe?
Well, it's actually the same thing that's making him not be able to have the votes. It's that he needs to do this to steal the election. And none of the people who are, the 4 or 5 votes that are like not going to do this don't want to be part of that. And part of the reason is everybody standing on the Republican side right now in the House and the Senate knows there's a good chance many of them are going to go out the window in November, particularly if they do something like this. So I think it's kind of like he's trying to get they are already have to be scared. For the first time, what you're seeing is they've always been afraid of him, and they've been afraid of being primaried because of him. Now the problem is they're starting to look at a general election, and what's happening is they're suddenly afraid of general election voters, not their primary voters, and he doesn't help them there. And voting to help him, mess up mail ballots or save, all this stuff that's buried in there. is not something that preserves them. And also, he's purged so many of them. I mean, Cornyn and others who are on their way out, literally serving the very last days, including Mitch McConnell, who, even if he showed up, he's one of the votes who wouldn't be doing this, and there's no signs that he's able to show up or can speak. And so you have Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, asking him to literally verbally put out a statement saying I'm okay or resign. All this is, but I do think that this whole McConnell thing actually adds to the problem. Where do you get votes to confirm the AG? Where do you get the vote? It's that close right now, and certainly Lindsey Graham's sister is now serving in that seat, but I'm not sure that most of the people who are sort of like now in their last days, I don't think are going to walk the plank for him. Some of them are ticked off at him, frankly. And then you got the problem of the people who are on the bubble, like Hinson in Iowa and other places. Now, she's been out there bragging about her endorsement from Donald Trump. It's not doing her any good. And I think if she votes for this, maybe helps her with the MAGA base. But frankly, having been out in Iowa, the independents and everybody else will say, you're out of here. So that's why I don't think he can pull the votes together.
Yeah, and this to me reminds me of all the things we heard in 2024 about why was Trump running again for president in 2024. And part of the rationale was if he runs and wins, he's not going to get indicted for all of the stuff that he should have been indicted for. And I think he's a cornered dog. And the Save America Act is because if the Democrats in any normal election would win and have a rather large majority in the House, the Senate, I think, is up in the air. And so he knows what that means. He knows he'll be in constant investigation, for justifiably so, for all of the stuff, the war, the tariff, everything. I mean, all of the grift, all of the things that he's done. And so I think I think deep down he knows that if the Democrats win and he's not done nothing to change the poll numbers, he continues to act the way he's always acted. And we can talk for a sec about his poll numbers today, which are just deplorable. This what he thinks is his only way out of the box that he's faced with.
Yeah, let's talk about his poll numbers, because both of you have been in this game for a long time. If you were working for Donald Trump right now, or Republicans, you'd be hitting the panic button, right? Things are pretty dire for the Republican Party.
Well, let me go first, Joe, and then you go. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I wrote down, the latest poll numbers is he's got a 38% job approval, way worse than it was in 2020. 2018, his first midterm election. His job approval among independents is 1972. A net minus 53 job approval. And if you look at the sort of the strongly approved, we've talked about this before, the strongly approved versus the strongly disapproved, which is the clearest sign of who's motivated. Mm-hmm. It's 21 strongly approved, 49% strongly disapproved. So he's in worse than Jimmy Carter territory. He is, his numbers are worse than Bush was in 2006. When the Democrats did overwhelming, worse than 2018 when there was a Democratic wave. And so in any normal election without all of the sort of unethical and unconstitutional redistricting stuff they did, in my view, this would be over already. And so the only thing keeping them in the game and even close is the fact that they picked up 6 or 7 seats by redrawing in midterm maps. So his numbers are bad. And so the only advice I could give is don't be yourself, right? I mean, don't be Donald Trump, and your numbers may go up, but he can't help himself because he thinks he's the smartest person in the room, and he thinks he's won all these elections, and he thinks, he's smarter than generals and admirals and senators and governors, and he's smarter than everybody. And so, I mean, the it would be do something totally different, try to appeal across the aisle, none of which is he wants to do or is in his DNA. And so he'd have to become somebody that he's not.
Yeah, I actually think, look, the good news here is that he's decided to be obsessed with his way out is the SAVE Act, which is a lot better than, I mean, he's decided that's better than putting troops on the ground in Iran. So I think, and that's the good side of the coin, because that's the only other crazy thing that he could, that he might still try to do out of like this, he's got to disrupt the election somehow, in his view, I think. And I think Matthew's right about that. And he sees that as his only way out. It does go back. I agree with Matthew about his running, because it keeps him out, out of the investigations. He knows it, and I think that's the same problem. The people who are, in the Senate, who are up, he's now, when you got 18% of independents, and Matthew and I would agree with this. I think most independents are not independents. They say they're independents, but they lean Republican. They're really Republicans who just call themselves independents, or they're Democrats who call themselves independents. And that might be a third to 40%, both ways. 40% of independents are really kind of strong leaning R's, and 35, 40 are strong leaning D's. And then you got 20% who are really seriously, like, I don't know about either of these. All of them have problems with both parties, but they lean hard. When you start getting 18 to 70 something, you just don't see independents moving that hard. It's almost like they're like in some of these elections that we've had, they're voting almost at the same proportion for Democrats as the Democrats are. They're certainly not. I mean, I've been in focus groups 2 weeks ago, 2 MAGA groups, 2 groups of Republicans who don't consider themselves MAGA, and 2 groups of independents who lean Republican. We made sure that they were, of that. None of them. They all are nowhere near the kind of energy, engagement, support. I'm not saying, but by the way, all of them, particularly the MAGA groups, were like, geez, the president is doing the best he can, but so disappointing. And if only the Democrats would get out of his way, maybe he could win that war, or maybe he could lower price. But I mean, they're there, but it's very tamped down, and it's still kind of pretzels to blame somebody other than him. But there's no one jumping up and down in the room saying, oh, hell yeah, I can't wait to vote to keep this stuff going on. And then once you move over across into Republicans who don't consider themselves MAGA, or independents who lean, those leaners are voting 50-50 for the Democrat. I mean, in other words, they still do lean, but half of them are saying, no, I can't do this anymore. I'm voting for the Democrats. So it just shows how much the erosion is there. And that's why I think Matthew's right. When you look at these battlegrounds, particularly battleground districts, even the ones in Texas that they redrew, and I love Matthew, who knows a hell of a lot about Texas, but there's districts down there that they redrew based on how Latinos and independents voted for them in 2024. They're not voting that way, or not showing up in polls that way today. So I'm not even sure the redistricting advantage that they conjured up is going to be all that helpful. I'm much more worried about what he's going to do when they don't pass this thing for him, and he's got to. Who knows how outside the box he's going to be with throwing obstacles up to stop people from voting.
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to add, and we gotten this at the end, but I want to do it now because we're talking about independents and how they look at things, is the only person, I mean, it's not like they're become Democrats. It's not like
Yeah.
these
No.
voters that they're, and I'm looking at US Senate races, I think is really important in this, and how the candidates maneuver, especially the new candidates who want to win, like Tallarico and Alabama, and Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and Jackson in Maine, is who the only person among independents who has worse numbers than Donald Trump is?
Chuck Schumer?
Chuck Schumer.
Right.
And 46% of Democrats disapprove of Chuck Schumer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And overwhelmingly independents. Chuck Schumer strongly approve among independents is 1%. Strongly disapprove is 40%. That's why I actually thought Jackson and Maine, in my view, and I've advocated for this, and I'm curious to hear what y'all think, is I think the Democrats who are running should say, I'm not going to vote for Chuck Schumer. I'm going to support a leader who represents the working class of America, and Chuck Schumer's, it's time for him to go. And I mean, if I were Tallarico, and I would give him this advice. I think Jackson came out and said last week, I'm not going to support Chuck Schumer. I'll support somebody, but I'm not going to support Chuck Schumer. It does two things. One is it takes the boogeyman away from the Republicans who are going to try to distract from Donald Trump and say Chuck Schumer is going to be running this person's vote no matter where they're from.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does that. It sort of removes that negative thing from it. And then it separates you from being a Washington Democrat. And somebody in Alabama, and somebody in Texas, and somebody in Maine, the most important thing they can do is say, I'm not part of that deal. And a good way to say you're not part of that deal is say you're not going to support Chuck Schumer.
Joe, if you were advising Democrats, would you tell them distance yourself from Chuck Schumer at all costs?
Oh, I think I was one of the first people saying Chuck shouldn't be the majority, be our leader anymore in the Senate. I mean, literally a year, 2 years ago, I was saying that because I just think, and I've said it, look, a lot of people, the reason they got there and the reason they're in leadership was in the old days, you had to be able to have a leader who could go across and cut a deal with McConnell or somebody and get 4 or 5 votes and keep the caucus together when you did it. And Schumer was actually very, very good at that. I mean, that was what he was, so he was groomed. I mean, when the guy gets in the Senate the first day and starts moving up the leadership ladder, that's how it goes. We're in a totally, completely different world. You need a strong opposition leader who's going to who's not, and he's just not that guy. This isn't an affront on him. He's just not the right person for the moment. Democratic
and Joe, he's not an effective communicator.
Right. Yeah. No. I agree with that. That goes without saying, Matthew. But so literally in Massachusetts right now, you do have this weird fight in the Democratic primary where Seth Moulton is running, saying he will not support Schumer for leader, and of course Markey, who's 80 and would be 86 when he leaves, is in the Schumer is my leader category. I don't know if Seth will win that or not, but it's clearly one of the undercurrents in that primary. I agree with Matthew. If you're a Democratic nominee out there in any state, it's the best place to be is we need new leadership in Washington. Period. Don't forget about Schumer. We just need running because we need new leadership. It's not working. The status quo isn't working. We need change. And yes, I will vote for a new leader. That's all you got to do. And I don't understand why even some of the incumbents like Markey, et cetera, are still out there thinking acting like, by the way, if we take the Senate, Chuck Schumer has a chance of getting the votes to be the leader again. I don't believe he does. And so I don't even understand why sort of keep the facade up of, oh, yes, of course, I'll be voting for Schumer. It doesn't. Oh, because you want the money in the general election. That's the only possible explanation. And like Schumer's not going to take a walk on you if you can win that Senate seat. He can't afford to. So that's shouldn't even be a worry.
I think it's interesting that the anti-Chuck Schumer contingent, it doesn't break down on ideological lines
No.
because Markey is the progressive in that race.
Yeah.
And yet he's with Schumer. Alyssa Slotkin, who is considered a fairly moderate senator from Michigan, she said that Chuck Schumer shouldn't be leader. I think that to some degree it's generational.
Oh, no, it's definitely generational. But I think, like I said, forget about all that stuff. Forget about generational. It's either. Look, I firmly believe this is a change election that has a lot less to do. And I agree. No one's voting for a Democrat because, I mean, a lot of those independents are not voting for Democrats because they've suddenly become Democrats. They're voting for them because they represent change away from what Trump and MAGA have wrought. And so, at the same time, there are tons of people, and we see this with why the party's favorable or Democrats in Congress's approval is so low. They don't like the status quo of either party, and so incumbent or challenger, if you're running, this is a year. I just think it's so clear that we need new leaders, that across the board, I don't care what Republican, Democrat, everybody wants new leadership, and to change the status quo, that it's not working. Now, some have the version of let's burn it all down because it's not working. That's out there. And there are other people who have the, we need new leadership and we have to have real innovation and change government and have reforms. But to put the whole thing, I think the cost that really hurt Kamala Harris the most in 2024 was in defending democracy and in defending Biden and defending the way things, trying to keep things the way they were. She was defending the status quo in a time when no one wanted the status quo. They wanted to know why she would be different. And of course, she had that moment where she said she couldn't think of something she'd do differently than Joe Biden. And I think that quote alone was enough to make a lot of people say, well, hell with that. I'll do something. Trump's different. I'll do that. And I think that's sort of where people are.
And I mean, this goes to the whole idea. The reason that moderates in the Democratic Party are losing in certain races isn't ideological. It's not ideological. What it is that the progressive candidates, by and large, the ones that have won, are more clear, they're more courageous, and they speak truth to power. Right. And so the problem with moderates, it's they won't turn on a person like Chuck Schumer. They'll try to dance along this little balance beam and try to make everybody happy and not say anything too bad or not say anything too. So I think this whole, I mean, there are obviously some people in the Democratic Party that say some crazy stuff, but all the candidates that have won that we can point to, I mean, Mondami is mayor of New York, not because of his progressive ideology. He's mayor of New York because he was the candidate that was most clear and strong in that race.
Yeah. No, and he exudes that, whether you agree with him or not. He has a persona that communicates clearly what he stands for. Now, we'll wait and, some of these ideas of his, I think, it's all about everybody, of course, in the polarized planet that we're in, they're bad ideas before they're even tested. But so but he's going to put them to work, and who knows? It all goes back like I mean, I remember when the Howard Dean campaign ran, and the party thought we should be, it was disqualifying that he was for civil unions um, in 2003, 2004. What, like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years later, the vice president of the United States is coming out for gay marriage, and Barack Obama a couple weeks later does the same thing. So some of these policies are going to work. Some are going to be complete failures. I think, look, one of that's going to be the interesting thing here. Some of these candidates are going to win, like Mondami has, and then they're going to have an opportunity to govern or to put their ideas before a vote. And look, the one thing we know, and this is what's sort of crazy about the whole thing, the one thing we know is the U.S. Senate is now, some crazy guy or woman gets elected the U.S. Senate from either party. They're going to have a lot of fun screaming all the time, but there's 99 other people there. The damn thing, you can't get anything through that everybody agrees on, let alone some insane idea about ending ending all taxes on everybody or something like that. I mean, it's not going to happen. So this is more, I think, a problem in that, yeah, some of them will say crazy things, and the Republicans are very good at sticking whatever that is to the rest of the party. They have a lot more crazy people who say crazy things in their party, but the Democrats just are not good at casting that, other with Trump. I mean, that's the problem with the Democratic Party is every crazy thing, it's got to be tied to Trump, and it's all Trump's fault. And I think it lets a lot of his enablers on the Republican side kind of off the hook or fly under the radar.
Totally agree with Joe on that.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the Iran war, which has heated up. And clearly, this was an issue that was hurting Trump for a while. His numbers started to rebound a little bit, but now we're back in the thick of it. And a story that came out earlier this week is that the Pentagon is playing games with the numbers of casualties. Both fatalities and people have been injured, and have been downplaying the most devastating part of this war, which is the loss of life of our troops and troops who've been injured. When you have an administration that's struggling so much on credibility with voters, even with their own voters, how much of an issue do you think this will end up being in November?
Well, for me, this is all about empathy, right? This is all about empathy. When you deny casualties, and then you can have the relatives of those people stand up, and they're going to stand up, which is the worst case scenario for them, and say, "What is that? It's diminishing this person's sacrifice, right? If you don't even count them, you're not even you don't care about what the sacrifice they made." And so, to me, it goes directly to empathy. I don't think Iran will be a deciding issue on election day. It may demotivate. I think some Republicans are like this. He said he was an expert on everything, and he can't even do this right or even close to right on this. But what it does is it emphasize a complete lack of empathy by Donald Trump and the Republicans to confront this. And what that will affect is people's viewpoint of the economy. And if they're unwilling to be even empathetic about the loss of life in Iran or what's going on in Iran and be honest about it, how can we trust this guy to care about what we're going through on the economy?
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And we also, of course, have the impact on gas prices. Gas is back up to about $4.11 a gallon. We know that has a huge impact on voters and on cost of living. Donald Trump is still on this kick where he is out there. He was in the state of Michigan yesterday bagging on the idea of affordability. It's a fake thing. It's fake news. Who is advising him on this messaging, Joe? I mean, who is saying this is a great message for voters?
Well, I think most of the people that are advising him are not the people who are hurt by any of this. They're in on the grift, and they're all rolling in it. And I think are so out of touch. This isn't even an ideological thing. They're just out of touch because like they're living in a completely different world than the people who get hit with $4.11 gasoline prices and can't afford groceries. I mean, there's no one around Donald Trump living in that world. No one, zero zip. And if there is, they're a yes person who goes like, yes, sir, you're right. It's a great economy. So there's no, I mean, whether it's the Secretary of the Treasury, all of them, they're all like in on it and raking it in. And I suspect some of them will help him do anything to win because they don't want to go to jail either. So, so this is like one of those things where you look at the numbers, I mean, like some of the polling here in some of these Senate races, I mean, they are, I still think, I know Matthew's more circumspect than me on this, but I really still expect us to take the Senate as well. I mean, I'm pretty confident that we actually will, because I just think you look at these numbers, you look at where the independents are, you look at how lack of energy, and lack of, that like with Matthew was talking about, where on the strongly approve or or only somewhat, et cetera. You look at those dynamics of where the energy is. I don't see the Republican Party having the same kind of turnout, I think, that Trump's going to engender with the independents and Democrats and others who want to vote to change this and push back on it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I think if I were betting on this, I would bet the Democrats take the Senate and the House, almost in equal odds. I think at this point, I think what's happening is the generic ballot number, which has the Democrats with about a 5-point advantage on generic ballot, which is the question for viewers is, who would you vote for Congress, a Democrat or Republican? It is a lagging indicator of what's going to happen. Because if you take a look at the 40 some odd special elections that have been held since Donald Trump got elected in 2024, the average overperformance by Democrats is 15 points. And all of those races they had like a generic ballot advantage in a race at 4, and then it ended up 12. And that's all a function of turnout. And part of the thing people have to understand is that what's happening is, in order pollsters, because they've been wrong before and all of that, they weight polls based upon past history. And they weight polls based on what was the Democrat Republican, difference in 2024, what was it in 2022 or whatever. And so I think all of that generic ballot is underestimating what's going to happen on election day. That's my view.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be a turnout election. And I don't see, first of all, we know from consistent, and you look historically here, consistently, there are lots of voters who come out for Trump when he's on the ballot in presidential year, but do not turn out for MAGA Republican candidates in the midterm off years. And that was the case in New Jersey. It's been the case in Virginia. It's been the case in every election in 2025, all the specials and everything else. I keep talking about this in Alabama. We just had the primary in May. There was no opposition at all in the Democratic primary, 116% increase in turnout over what happened in 2022, the last time there were Democratic primaries there. And on the Republican side, with $30 million being spent in a hotly contested Senate race, more millions for an AG's race, because they're one party, they had fights for all those offices and millions of dollars were spent. They had a 25% decrease in turnout from 2022. So it's even worse. As I would say, don't turn out in 18 and 22 when he's not on the ballot. It's worse now. He's favorables or approvals way low. And we're now seeing actual voting that demonstrates that lack of energy. And so I think Matthew's hit it straight up. There's a reason why Spamberger can go into an election with like a 5 point generic advantage, but perform 13 points or whatever it was above above what Harris did. And the same thing in New Jersey, and the same thing in all these other races that we're seeing. It's because, well, I think two things. One, I think independents are breaking much harder than what the polls beforehand show. I mean, they're broadening out. It's now, like Matthew said, 18 to 70 something on approval. So I think it's two things. I think the other thing is that they're voting. People are like independents, the double haters that we talked about a long time on Lincoln Square for a while. They're not just 2 or 3% of the electorate. They were like 11, 12% of the electorate in New Jersey and Virginia. They're voting, but they're voting 8-2 for the Democrat.
Yeah.
And this is, so no, this is, that's how we're overperforming. There's people who would normally not be voting, even in these primaries or in these off-year elections, double haters are voting, and they're voting big time or bigger than people expected for Democrats. And then you have more energy on the Democratic side, and less on the Republican side.
And less motivation by Republicans. Because if you think, if you're an independent who consistently votes Republican but still call themselves independent, they ain't voting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at these groups and I'm seeing we had people in the group saying, you know what, I'm so pissed that I've been put in this position that to vote for change, I have to vote for a Democrat. And they, again, like a lot of them do, spit the word out like it's poison. I'm never going to do that. And then they say out loud in the group, you know what, I'm just not going to vote. That's how and that was pervasive in the groups that I'm seeing.
So before we wrap this tonight, I want to start with you, Matthew. What is a sleeper race out there that you're watching and we should all be paying attention to?
Well, maybe it's not a sleeper race, but I think it will shatter. It will make huge tidal waves on election day. Is I think Tallarico. I think Tallarico's going to win.
Well,
and
you spend so much time in Texas. Tell us why.
Well, one, he's a really good candidate. He represents change because just how young he is, how he comes across. He's a person of faith, which in Texas is incredibly important. And he speaks the language because he went to seminary school. Mm-hmm. And then he's running against a criminal. And I mean, I think he would still have a realistic shot at beating Cornyn if Cornyn won the primary, but that didn't happen. And he's raising more money than you can imagine. I mean, he's raising, 5-6 times what Paxton is raising. And I think that race will cause a huge tectonic shift in the plates if all of a sudden a statewide race is won in Texas by a Democrat. That changes the calculation for a whole bunch of stuff, including a presidential race.
Joe, you host On the Ground for us here. You've been all over the country. What's a race that you're keeping your eye on?
Well, first of all, I agree with Matthew about Tallarico. I think he's going to win that. I think he's a great candidate. Some of them aren't sleepers anymore. I mean, like Iowa is just, I think Rob Sands is going to win that. I think Turek, we all got to do the work. They've got to keep the campaigns going. But I think that I think there's going to be some races that, literally across the South, Florida, Alabama, the Carolinas. I think we're going to have some real surprises there in both the House and like governor. Like I would not go to sleep on David Jolly having a shot against.
I agree with that.
Donald's in Florida. It by no stretch is that is like, oh yeah, bet on that. But I think all the pieces are in place there. And Donald's is such a horrible candidate, and Jolly is turning out to be, I think, just a fantastic, one of the best candidates we have out there in races that people aren't really paying attention to or writing off because, gosh, Florida's too expensive, all that stuff. but I'm not sure the money, and Donald's has plenty of it, by the way. I mean, probably be outspending Jolly 10-1 or something like that. I don't know. I think there's you and Matthew can tell you this too. You can have somebody with that much money, but it's diminishing returns. And I think the fight for change this year can lift some boats that no one's thinking about right now. And I think that's what I think is going to happen. There are going to be some Senate. This reminds me of like 94 and 1980, where you'd go to sleep or wake up on election day thinking like 3 or 4 Democrats are going to go out the window. And 1980, we lost 12 U.S. senators. At 94, we lost, I think, 54 House seats, and like 8 or 9 U.S. senators lost the Senate. I think that's going to be this is going to be that kind of year, but the other way. Because
I think we're going to know early on what's happening on election night, because I think what you're going to see is you're going to see some people that thought solid Republicans didn't have an opponent are going to either lose, or it's going to be really close.
Yeah, right. I agree with that 100%.
Well, Florida is a great state for us to keep our eye on because they always report early. And if David Jolly is shocking everyone, that will probably be a pretty good indication that it's going to be a good night for the Democrats.
Well, the one sleeper issue, it's not sleeper either, is data centers. What's happening
absolutely.
is the Republican Party has got a ton of, Donald's is one, Tuberville in Alabama. Obviously, Trump has been a AI data center enthusiast accelerator. And in Alabama, it's like, hell no. I mean, and so
it's one of the it's one of the only issues that unites equally Republicans, Democrats, and Independents.
Exactly. And Tuberville's on the wrong side of that, and Doug Jones is for a 1-year moratorium. I mean, Jolly's got a similar situation going on in Florida, and so that's what I'm saying. I just think there's some real roiling going on here, where there are some, like the data centers, where Democrats and Independents and Republicans are all in lockstep to slow this thing down, and the Republicans, a lot of these candidates are like, hell no, we cannot lose to China. Forget about your jobs, forget about your electricity bills, and it's not working. It's not working at all. So I think we're going to see some surprises. I would not go to sleep on some of these Southern governors races and I just think you're going to wake up, and I do think there will be some senators on the Republican side who no one thinks are in trouble today, who wake up, it was like really close, or they got squeaked out by somebody. If you look at some of these, like even Mississippi, that race, it's 4 or 5, they're both in the 40s. Like the races, there are a lot of Republican incumbents out there. Tuberville's in the 40s. No, they're not above 50, many of them. And I think that's always a really bad sign when you're in the party that has the real power and you're an incumbent. You do not want to be in the mid or low 40s. And they've got several of them that are in that position. Hinson in Iowa is another one.
Well, Matthew and Joe, I appreciate you talking with us tonight. I couldn't ask for better strategists to talk with during this crucial time before the midterms. And thanks to all of you for joining us as well. Stick with us on Lincoln Square. If you don't already subscribe, I'd encourage you to do so. You can do so for free by hitting that button right there on your screen. Joe, Matthew, thank you again.
Thanks, Susan. Awesome job today.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Great being with you, Matthew.
You too, Joe.